or either because you didn't know how to handle it. Amen. I was doing some work on my house not long ago, and I came up on a troubled spot. I wasn't sure how I was going to fix it, and it was taking up too much time. So I moved on to something else. Give myself a little while to ponder, and I'll come back to that another day. Have you ever been there where you put things off because you wasn't ready to deal with them? Have you ever put off paying a bill because you knew the money wasn't there? Have you ever procrastinated about making a doctor's appointment because you were not sure how you would handle the results of the examination? Because in your mind, you already knew what was going on, and you were just scared to hear the doctor say it, so you put it off longer and longer. And that's what these disciples did. And y'all know the only thing that happens when you put off something that needs to be done now for later, the pressure of the situation gets harder and harder to bear, and your stress level goes up, so it actually gets worse instead of getting better. You need to tell somebody something, and you put it off because you don't know how they're going to deal with what you have to tell them. And you put it off so long that if you aren't careful, you never tell them. And that causes an even greater problem if somebody else mess around and tell them before you do. Because then they think you were never going to tell them the truth. Am I talking to anybody? It's late in the day. And they're in a wilderness place, and the disciples don't know what to do, so they just put it off. And not only did they put it off, but they also tried to put the blame on somebody else. How often do we try to pass the blame? They put the blame on the people. They told Jesus, I tell you what you do, just send those people away and let them get their own food. Every man for himself and God for us all. And so they began to put the responsibility on somebody else, on the people themselves. But Jesus says, no, it's your responsibility. You give them something to eat. Tell your neighbor, you have to accept your responsibility. In John's gospel, Philip even said it would take 8 months' wages to buy enough bread that all those people could eat. Now they're worrying about the money instead of trusting the one that cannot fail. Where are we going to get enough money? Where are we going to get the food? There are no stores out here. And if there were stores, we don't have the money to buy the goods. It would take months of wages to feed all these people. They worried, but their worrying prepared not a single meal. And how many times have you had some problems and you put it off because you were worrying, but when you finished worrying, the problem was still there? Can I get a witness here? The worrying didn't prepare a meal. A miracle was about to take place, but before God could work the miracle, the disciples had to accept their responsibility. And I wonder this morning what miracles you are blocking in your own life because you're not willing to take responsibility for your part in solving the problem. Sometimes he's just waiting for you to move before he moves. Tell your neighbor, accept your responsibility. Secondly, assess your resources. Accept your responsibilities. And I say, assess your resources. Assess your resources. Thank you. Once you accept your responsibility, then you need to assess your resources. In verse 38, he said, how many loaves do you have? And I don't know about y'all, but I have to check my account every now and then. I know some of y'all might have it good and y'all don't have to access your resources. You just go and do whatever you want to do. But sometimes folk ask me about doing things. I have to check my money first. Am I talking to anybody? I know some of y'all folks say, let's go eat. Y'all say, let's go. Sometimes I can check it on my phone now, but I have to pull it out and say, okay, let me see what I got first, because I don't need to get there and get embarrassed and stuff. Am I talking to anybody? Anybody ever have to check their money? I mean, I want to tell you, yeah, but I got to check my money first. Tell your neighbor, assess your resources. Every night, don't fool me. Do you ever have to check it? I had to put it on my phone so I could check it on the go sometime. Don't just fill the tank up. Let me see what I want versus what I can get. Because it might not be the same. Tell your neighbor, I got to check my count sometimes. How many loaves do you have? He asked, they assessed, and when they found out, they said 5 and 2 fish. If you want God to meet a need in your life, you have to assess your resources. This is what I have, and this is what I can do with what I have. When God works a miracle, you check the Bible, he always begins with what you have, not with what you don't have. He took what they had. You see, these disciples were focusing on the shortage. They were focusing on what they didn't have instead of focusing on what they do have. We don't have enough. Instead of saying, this is what I got right here. Am I talking to anybody? How can we feed this many people? We don't have money to buy food. We don't have food itself. How can we do it? It is an impossibility. Jesus said, maybe you overlooking something. You're looking at what you don't have. God says, look at what you do have. What have I given you? Assess your resource. Am I preaching yet? All through the Bible. Somebody say he ain't preaching. He ain't got on no suit. All through the Bible. How you going to preach with no suit on, no tie, nothing? All through the Bible. You will find that when God worked in the lives of his people, he always started with what somebody had. Am I right about it? Y'all go to Bible study. Am I right? Moses. He asked Moses when he sent Moses to deliver the Israelites out of the hand of Pharaoh, Moses, what do you have in your hand? Moses said, a rod. God said, throw it down. He threw it down and it became a serpent. God said, pick it up again. He picked it up and it became a rod again. But it was no longer Moses' rod. Now it was God's rod in Moses' hand. I wish I had a praying church. And with that very rod, he parted the Red Sea. With that very rod, he got water from a rock. With that very rod, he'd lead the children of Israel throughout their wilderness wanderings. And so he says, assess what you have. I tell you today, assess what you have, because God always begins with what you have. How many loaves do you have? Go see, count them. You're talking about what you need, but what do you have? They said 5 and 2 fish. Why did he send them, Minister Breland, through 5,000 to 15 or 20,000 to find out what kind of food they already had? He was preparing them for a miracle. He wanted them to see that what God would do could only be done miraculously. Because if they took up enough food to feed the people, you don't need a miracle. I wish I had a praying church. He had to prove that they couldn't do it so they would know that nobody but God could do it. God has to let us run up on some hard spots every now and then so that we won't get big-headed and say, well, you know, I could have done that anyway. I wish I had a praying church. It could only be done by faith. It could only be done by God. It could not be done by man. You want God to move, you have to give him the little that you have. Give him that little bit of talent. You say, I can't sing, I can't do. You can do something. Give him that energy. Give him that love. Give him that strength. We want to sing, I give myself away, but we're not really giving ourselves away. Truly give yourself to him and watch God go to work. Tell your neighbor, just watch him work. Watch him. Truly give yourself and watch God go to work. Accept your responsibilities, accept your resources, and now acknowledge God's requirement. Tell your neighbor it's over. I told you it wouldn't be long. Now the hero of this story is mentioned in John 6 and 9. They said, here's a boy. With 5 small barley loaves. And 2 fish. Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks to God, and distributed to the people. What was God's requirement of this young man? God's requirement was that he give what he had to Jesus. Before the people could be fed, before the need could be met, before the shortage could be taken care of, God's requirement was that you need to give. Some of us always, Deacon Williams, want to get, but don't ever want to give. Some folk always ready to go to lunch, long as you paying, but they don't ever invite you. Everybody going, they just sit and look, waiting for you to say, well, I got it. Amen. You done been there an hour longer than you meant to be, waiting for somebody to say, I got it. Some folk don't mind riding as long as you're riding in their car, but they don't ever want to drive because when you get back, they still want to have their gas.